I wonder if you could help me connect the dots a little bit.
Sure.
So, if we're in that ground of consciousness, and I think part of the problem with the word bliss is bliss gets all kind of tied up with good and bad experiences. Like, I want a different word, but that's okay for now. Yeah. When you're there, it's like I'm wondering where the motivation, or maybe where the ground of ethics comes from. Because I've always understood ethics to come from a recognition of other. And so if there's a unity of consciousness, we've removed other at some level. So I'm wondering if you could connect those dots for me at all. Where does ethics, where does a change in the heart for behavior come from? But, yeah.
Sure, wonderful. I love that. Well, these qualities are the very qualities of consciousness itself. And with refinement of perception, we get in touch with these qualities on the internal level. They're sometimes called Platonic values. These Platonic values are, in fact, that which gives birth then to commandments, or codes of conduct, external, internal, like yogic yama and yama, or 10 commandments. But they are ingrained within. So it's like consciousness.
It's the connection itself to that ground that changes the heart or moves.
It's where it's where consciousness, let's say, you see, when it closer to the source, the more refined it is. And that term, refinement of perception, or sometimes called celestial perception, is a very important part of the process. Precisely for the reasons which is the basis of your question. Because that what really makes us a better individual, even speaking from that perspective. It makes us who we are, right? The closer we move to the core of ourselves, it also makes us who we are, fundamentally, rather than, let's say, a conglomerate of stresses, which just when it expresses itself is ugly. But the core of our self is divine, literally. The human core, the core of the human being is divine. Not only, and this is important, not only because awareness, let's say, is a Godhead, or what have you, right? Not because we're empowered by consciousness at all times. But this very evolutionary masterpiece is made in such a way that is capable of carrying life at that high level of development, where it at once it reflects consciousness perfectly, where consciousness can cognize itself again, and at the same time it is in the position of taking care of the Garden of Eden. This is the true definition of Adam Kadmon. It's the true definition of Adam in terms of biblical, let's say, role. The God created and then placed the in the garden.
I actually am sort of interested in the way you put it, because it was very reflective to me of the nature of the 10 Commandments, which live in the 2 tables of the law. The first one is one in effect, it gets closer and closer to the divine, and that is where one is moved, changed, shifted. I mean, then you live out of that reality and you care for others. The second half of the Commandments are built that way. That's interesting. Thank you. I just needed the connection, because it wasn't
No, it's a beautiful, wonderful, and very, very, very timely question. Very timely. I mean, timely subject and theme, because at the moment a lot of the crises and problems out there is being approached from the good intention, and we know where the good intention can pave us the way to, you know.
Yeah.
So we need to introduce really, really urgently a very different approach towards dealing with everything, and above all else, dealing with the crisis we find ourselves in. And that is directly get in touch with the Platonic values, which literally structuring our physiology even, down on a physiological level. It's not just enough to say that it is structured in consciousness. It is actually structured in our physiology. So if we take care of our physiology in a proper way, you know, it's an integral science we're speaking about here. It's an integral approach. So everything matters. Everything. Quality of food we eat, you know, how we entertain ourselves. Everything goes there. So then Platonic values, they become apparent, and there's no need to really to check, oh, how am I supposed to act in this? It just acts itself in the right way.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
I had a question regarding the experience of facing death and having an experience of awakening through that process, but how when you re-enter, you experience that sense of bliss. You might be kind of sharing some of what I've experienced, and I know of other people who experience that. And you go through that state of bliss for some time, but then you get caught up in maybe the consequences of the trauma, whether it's physical trauma or psychological trauma, and that takes you away from knowing yourself in that way. And so I guess I was wondering if you have any guidance for, because so many people go through that now, trauma, so much trauma, at least in, it's obviously gone on throughout time, but at least in our society, we're more aware and more educated about trauma because of the wars, etc., in the connection with the U.S. But I was just wondering if you could speak to that at all, because of your own experience in terms of trauma, understanding how to have compassion for oneself and the realities and the consequences of trauma, and being in this plane, being in this physical form, but how to move back to,
sure,
because that's where I've struggled, is how to honor the pain and honor all those things, but be able to go back to that.
I think first and foremost we need to establish what is trauma. What is trauma?
Right.
Because once we understand what trauma is,
right, I guess it's a complex question.
Sure. No, but let's do that.
Okay, so so trauma is, there's different ways. The way you were talking about it before, what you were just speaking of, then there's really almost like there's no trauma in a way. If you kind of, there is trauma, but there's not.
No, but let's not get caught in the intellectual concepts. What is trauma?
It's suffering, a form of immense suffering, a violation of
exactly.
seeing one's divinity, seeing another's divinity.
Exactly.
A disconnection from divinity.
Very good. So, essentially speaking, trauma is inability to process something. Inability.
To process something.
To process something.
Okay.
Because maybe that is a
beyond,
yes.
It's beyond our own recognition of
yes,
ourselves.
Something that the system fails to process. Because as long as the system processes or has the ability to process, no experience is traumatic, and everyone who is trained in martial arts will tell you that. It's one of the most important things that, in fact, the reason why, let's say, young men, when they go into combat and they come out of trauma, is because they cannot process, they're not prepared, they were not prepared to fight in the first place. They went through training, the muscles, and I've been in the military, you know, I know what it is.
Right.
You know, 70 push-ups, 100 push-ups, whatever, you know, like you go through this, that, you do, you know what to do, you know how to operate the gun machine, and, you know, like, that's not the training, really.
That's required.
This is why I said that, example with martial arts, that one of the prerequisites to go into a combat is first to have an inner peace. So what trauma is the lack of that. It's inability to process something. Our system fails to process information, because no experience, and this you have to really follow me carefully, no experience in itself, be very careful here, because everything is based on notions, you know, and we have notions, you know, and all notions operate. In itself, no experience is either negative or positive. And psychologists will give us a crash course on that. Because when psyche goes wild or out of place, that which is considered abnormal could become very pleasurable. You see? So we're not going to go there. It's a domain of psychology and psychiatry. But what's important to us here, and what is important to your question, is that if we first understand what trauma really is, it's inability of our system to digest the experience. That's what I mean, to process the experience.
Yes,
on whatever level. Just like you ate something and you can't digest it.
right, right.
As simple as that.
So what, from your experience,
Mm-hmm.
what is a way of going about digesting it? If you've tried the tradition, you know, the
Sure.
modalities that are presented to us in general, in order
So
to go to that.
the most obvious is to make system capable of freeing itself from that experience. So allowing that naturally leave our system, and that is also goes under the name of transcending.
Okay.
Everything needs to be transcended.
Okay.
All experiences need to be transcended.
Okay.
As you know, that there is also saying in Indian tradition that you could be bound by iron chains, but you could equally be bound by golden chains. Right? Negative experience bound us, but positive experience equally bound us, sometimes even more.
So it's very much the strength, the internal.
It's not so much of the strength, because like the strength should have to come from somewhere.
Right.
It's to transcend. Because when we transcend, the system gets by itself, by the very nature, it starts to vibrate with finer vibrations. Whenever it vibrates with finer vibrations, it naturally gets rid of itself, that which is not of its own, right? It just frees itself of stress, frees itself of all these undigested, unprocessed experiences. And that's what, you know, you can see that even, you can take it further. This will be a culminating, let's say, hint to this gathering. Life itself could be seen, life, this very, what is known as ignorance, unprocessed experience. Once we are able to process what this life is, we arrive on a qualitatively different level of experience. But the way to allow that is to transcend. So that's, you know, answer to that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of you for coming, supporting this event. Thank you very much. Oops.
Thank you, Igor. Seems
Thank
like
you.
we're on